Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this week's episode of What the Health Just Happened, where we talk about all things healthcare, business, and life. The goods, the bads, the ups, the downs, the lefts, the rights, and everything in between. We bring on some business owners, community advocates, everyone working in healthcare, not working in health. It doesn't matter. If you have a good conversation to have, you're entertaining, and you make me laugh, you're welcome on the show. Today, oh man, I'm excited. You were one of the first guests, CEO of Health Designs. We're going to talk all about health designs, a lot of healthcare stuff today, business stuff, probably Jeeps, I think, based off the pre-call. How should I introduce you? Is it Christopher, Topher, Margolin, or Margarine?
Yeah, so on the first, Christopher or Topher would be fine. On the second, I'm more specific in my requirement, and it's Margolin.
Margolin. For all of you that work with Mr. Margolin, does anyone call you Topher?
Most
people call you Topher. We'll get to that. Again, I love the intro. It's silly. Topher was one of the first guests. We first started the show. He did me a favor, jumped on the show. I think that we've gotten a lot better. This will be a lot more healthcare related than the first one because we talked about some exotic animals, the Virgin Islands, places you've lived. This might come up, but heavy emphasis on health designs today. Appreciate you joining. Welcome
My pleasure.
back.
Thank you.
You ready to party?
Happy to be here.
Okay. What is Health Designs and what do you do? I'm kidding. So Health Designs, incredible organization. I don't want to read the mission statement. I wrote it down. Can you recite it?
Sure I can.
Let's hear it.
So Health Designs was founded in 1995 with the single purpose of changing lives and transforming companies into healthier, happier workplaces, and has followed that as its sort of true north and guiding principle since day one. I'm a little newer to Health Designs since 1995. I actually acquired the company in 2019.
Perfect timing to buy a business.
Yeah, because
2019?
A first-time CEO in a new industry that's largely organized to provide on-site services to large employee groups at their place of employment, you'll learn a lot about a business going headfirst into a pandemic.
Two things jumped out. One, 1995, I don't math so well. 30 years?
Coming up.
Almost 30 years.
Almost 30 years.
Awesome. You join 2019. Something happened in 2020.
It did.
And you're working in essentially the healthcare space, health and wellness space, going on-site to businesses.
We were.
You were, correct. And you acquire this business first time as a CEO. Great career, right? Business coach too. I'm sure we'll talk some about that stuff. Let's hear it. Early on, kicked in the teeth.
It was a wild ride, and barely controlled chaos. Just getting my feet under me, so to speak, in the industry and in the business. And really had to sort of, there's this thing I'm told, I haven't lived through the situation, but when surfers get really pummeled by a wave, it can be so disorienting when they're thrown and dragged along the bottom. They have to exhale and follow the bubbles to show them which way was up.
Yeah, they swim down. I've had that happen, by the way.
Okay, so I liken it to that, right? It was trying to exhale and figure out where the bubbles would show you where the top is, and try to kick for the light and to get some air. But listen, we weathered the storm, so to speak, and really took that time to prepare for when sort of the clouds would part and things would sort of return to something resembling normal, which we all thought was going to happen pretty quickly, right? And then 2021 was also a total mess all the way into 22, if you remember the Omicron and Delta variants, because companies were still in this, are we going to go back on site? Are we going to stay hybrid? Are we going to stay remote? And what's going to happen there? So it really wasn't until 2023 that we were sort of out of crisis mode and able to work on the long-term strategic objectives that I had originally sort of dreamt up, if you will, back in 2019.
You got some art, Trace?
Yeah. As someone that's kind of like just started a business not too long ago, I always kind of look at my situation and I'm like, oh, this stinks. But do you think that situation made you actually stronger as a business owner? Like kind of almost starting out, getting kicked in the teeth?
It's not my first rodeo. I've
Okay,
been kicked in the
okay.
teeth before.
Okay,
I've,
yeah,
I've,
yeah.
I've started,
She's got fake teeth, by the way.
I've started some other businesses. Some have been successful to moderate degrees. Others have not. I think that there is something to be said for resilience, and I think I probably know the business better than I would in an alternative situation. I can't. It was a horrible, horrible period of time with a lot of sleepless nights. So I'm not going to lie to you and say, geez, yeah, I would do that all over again. I wouldn't at all.
Yeah.
I would have
But
loved to have.
That's timing based too. That has nothing. It's completely uncontrollable. Nothing within your control. But you weathered the storm, and now it sounds like you're in a not a great. Maybe you're in a great place.
We're in a great
Things
place.
Are going
yeah,
in the right
we're,
direction.
we're in a great place, and I'm fortunate to be surrounded by a great team.
Which-
We're resilient as an organization with a strong, deep culture. And we were able to retain our key talent throughout the pandemic, and we were ready to, sort of reemerge on the other side, and we have.
But before going into what exactly Health Designs does and size companies you work with, which I'm familiar with, but I'd like for you to talk about it too. And then we're going to go into the really crazy stuff that we talked about on the phone earlier. So Florida's different, right? Florida's the Wild West, I say it, especially during COVID. I feel like we reopened the state 3 or 6 months later. Did you notice a difference between working in Florida, right? The companies you were working with, and then you guys cover the entire nation pretty much.
We do. So, we're headquartered here, I should say, in Northeast Florida, and we actually have a small office out in the Pacific Northwest.
Washington, right?
Yeah, Spokane specifically. And most of the companies that we work with are headquartered in one of those areas, right? The Southeast, whether it's Carolinas, Alabama, Georgia, or Florida, or up in Oregon, Washington, Utah, Idaho. But because we work with companies, really the range is 500 up to about 3,500 employees, and we flex up or down when it makes sense for us and the client. But companies of those sizes rarely only have one location. So they're headquartered here, but
Yep.
they might have 1,500 people in Orlando and 400 in Chicago and 250 out in Nevada and 160 in Morristown, New Jersey, right? So that we get pulled into all those different geographies. So to answer your question, very little was closed in Florida. But companies, again, with employee sizes between 5 and 3,500, many were. But we have a lot of clients that actually can't do their jobs remotely, whether it's municipalities, health systems,
Yep.
lots of sort of manufacturing type facilities that were open. And those were easier to work with in the Southeast than some places, for instance, in the Northwest that really did close. Right? I remember Elon Musk talking about leaving the entire state of California. They wouldn't let him open his factories, right?
Yeah, that's still happening, I think, right,
Yeah.
in Austin.
Yep.
I love Florida, especially Northeast Florida. That happens to be where we reside. We try to keep the show local. You happen to service multiple states. I just want to reemphasize this. 500 to 3,500 employees is the normal range of companies you work with. But you can flex up or down accordingly, right? That doesn't mean you don't work with companies less than 500. That doesn't mean you work with companies that are larger than 3,500.
Correct. Yeah, it's really
You're
that
flexible.
we're flexible, and that mid-size sort of company are largely underserved in wellness benefits.
Do you
So
think
it's a good sweet spot for us there.
large companies bigger than 3,500 are better served in wellness than smaller companies? I can tell you in the space we work in, right? So we kind of play in the same playground. Health and wellness, we do insurance, lame. Under 500, under 100, there's no service
Yeah.
unless you're tied to a much bigger group. It just doesn't exist because I don't know. Anyways,
Is that because of budgets? Does that factor in? Just the smaller company is just not going to have that disposable.
There's a couple of factors. They may, and companies with under 100 employees are going to be subject to a lot of external factors, which is largely going to drive their healthcare costs. There's very little they can do to avoid just being rated with their peer group. And what that means is the health premiums that they pay are going to be largely unrelated to the actual health or claims of their organization, whereas larger groups are going to have more ability to be focused on the overall health and well-being of their employees because there's a direct benefit to them outside of employee performance, right? Which
Sure.
is fundamental. People cannot perform at their best if they're not physically, mentally, socially, financially, emotionally well.
Or at all. Yeah. They can't perform at all. If you're missing two of those four buckets,
Yeah.
you can't perform well. Like if you're missing emotionally and physically, you're not going to perform. If you're struggling financially and socially, it's going to come into work.
Yeah, and all those things are competing sort of for your mental white space, right? And how available you are to perform your function in any job is entirely hindered if those aren't addressed.
This is good to go kind of into the rest of health design stuff, the conversation we had before. So I wrote this down, focus on larger strategic initiatives. Now you're getting to that point where you can. And it goes back to me, data-driven, but the human element that health designs focuses on. Talk about that. So you are data-driven, but the human element will never go
And
away.
I think one of the things that did attract me to health designs originally and still is held true is there's been, over the past bunch of years, this real attempt to really displace humans in favor of technology. And while the industry has developed some wonderful technology resources and virtual options, we believe that the human element, right, in these what I think are very intimate services that are provided when you're talking about health coachings, biometric screenings, et cetera, we've really fought to keep people in the process, and we see the results, and we can move needles, and we can help participants truly make the meaningful shifts and changes in their behavior that they need to be supported along their journey and path in wellness. While we certainly use technology to augment what we do, it's not in an attempt to move to a entirely technology-driven offering, if that makes sense.
It does to me. I think, again, technology is not going away. It's only improving, and it is a tool. But I just personally, you can never replace the human element, right? So let's use biometric screening, for example. There will never be a computer or a robot that can go to a 500-life company in St. Augustine, Chicago, and draw blood and sit down and ask the necessary questions that matter. Technology cannot replace the human element.
Might be able to draw the blood, might be able to actually supply the numbers. What it can't do is saying, hey, when you look at this, what do you see? What's important to you about your health and well-being? What are the challenges? Here's what we see. You're not defined by these numbers, but they certainly give us indications about some areas where you're doing great and maybe some areas of potential risk. Let's talk about it.
I always wonder too, like the other end of the questions, how open are people to be honest? When you're, let's talk about biometric screening for a second. So Health Designs does biometric screening. What is that? What does that mean?
So that's one of the services we provide. And the biometric screening process is to go on site, and our biometric screeners are really health coaches. And the health coach is going to engage a participant and take a light finger stick to draw a few drops of blood, put it in an analyzer, and get that person's blood glucose, their HDL, LDL, and triglycerides, full lipid panel, and be able to have a meaningful conversation. They're also going to measure their blood pressure and height and weight to get a picture in a relatively short period of time, 2 to 3 minutes, of this person's health. These are good indicators of what people's risks are from either metabolic disease, cardiovascular disease, or diabetes, sort of indicators. And to be able to, again, interact with them. That's where the health coaching is so critically important.
On the spot. So again,
On the spot.
We'll talk healthy or not healthy. I would assume these health coaches, you can do a finger stick. Blood sugar's high. LDL's high. HDL's lower than it should be. Blood pressure's through the roof. You can look at that person and say they're probably not as healthy as they could be. Are you educating and providing these services on the spot?
Yeah, because sometimes that person doesn't realize what some of those risks mean, or they aren't aware of what they can do to alter them. So it's really meeting the participant where they are. It's not about telling them, hey,
You're not healthy.
you're not healthy,
don't do
right?
that.
You're
Don't do
going to
that.
die.
Yeah.
You're fat. You should be skinny.
You say-
should,
you can't-
right?
you can't say that,
right.
but you
Well, it's
yeah.
not effective. But here's what happens. You said, how open are people going to be? I can't tell you how many participants sit down and say, I know what you're going to tell me already,
Oh, I've had that.
and
So-
I'm not healthy. And
I went to a client of ours on behalf of Health Designs once. I don't know if you remember this. Like, I drew their blood and went through it they had a small office like an hour south. And instead of you guys having to drive down there, I said, let me go do it, just draw their blood. You said it. This lady walked in and immediately just go on that ranch, because I know what you're going to say.
yeah, and really, I think someone who's not skilled in health coaching might say, yeah, not my job. I'm just here to give you the numbers, right?
Oh, that's what I said.
But a good health. That's what I call bleed.
That's not true, by the way.
That's what I call bleed and read, right?
Yeah, I like that. Bleed
Here's
and
the
read.
numbers. Good luck. See you in a year.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, a lot of primary care
And
physicians. by
as
the way.
opposed to the coaching that takes place, say, well, actually, you probably don't know what I say, because I don't know what I'm going to say. But let's talk about you. Why do you say, what's on your mind, right? When you think about your own health and wellness, what's going on? What's important to you? And I can't tell you how, and you say, how transparent are they going to be? It's amazing. We have such an incredibly talented team in the field, and so many participants will be there at the whether it's a health fair or a specific screening event, and they'll be saying, okay, you're next, there you go. And they'll say, no. I have to wait for my coach, because I want to tell them what I did. It happens over and over
That's
again,
good.
where they come back and say, because of what you did, and we have all these testimonials where people say, I had no idea my blood pressure was at the level it was. I went to my doctor the next day as a result of that screening. I've lost 50 pounds this past year, changed my activities, my blood pressure's under control, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Watch this. When was the last time you checked your blood pressure? Justin?
I couldn't even tell you.
Don't even know.
Yeah, I know.
Trey?
The last time was, I think my wife has to check it for health insurance or something.
I love this
Like-
guy. Or
Would-
something.
Yeah.
Were you high? Were you elevated? Like, we're at that age.
Oh, it was way high.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even know what
yeah.
high is.
Which I think
That's
had
Justin.
a dip in and was drinking coffee, so that probably didn't help.
It doesn't move that much. But again, you
Oh,
hear this.
wow,
Like,
okay.
I cringe a little bit sometimes because of the number of the population that just doesn't know the basic information that long term, we're going to talk about later, health span versus lifespan, right? These things matter a little bit, guys. Hate to call you out, but sorry.
And I'll tell you also, look, the reality is we are in no way, shape, or form an alternative to maintaining a relationship with a primary care physician. However, our two friends here across the table, by their own admission, likely aren't seeing a doctor very often.
Nope.
So we do become, right, unless something's wrong.
Oh,
Unless you're
100%,
like,
yeah.
you know,
I am not going
particularly
unless something's bad.
males between the ages of about 20 and 50. Like,
would say
if you're
18
not
yeah.
dying, right? If you're not in risk of bleeding out, or there's an organ that's supposed to be inside your body that you realize is outside your body, you don't even go to the doctor.
Yeah, no
right?
way.
So we do become often the first line of defense for a huge portion of the population that if this wasn't a service provided by their employer, they just wouldn't have insights here.
There's so much to unpack. I knew this would happen. We got 5 minutes left to the first commercial break. I want to hit the mental health care versus mental well-being. Big difference there. We might miss one of the last two. It doesn't matter. We'll see where we go.
Yeah.
So
Let's go.
we've talked about a lot of mergers and acquisitions. Like, what are you hearing and seeing? Does that affect end consumers, employees?
We talked about a lot about the activity in the space, right? It's a fairly hot area in that there's a lot of investment interest, and we're not. I've not done yet with Health Designs what I wanted to ultimately do, so we don't entertain that from an investment or acquisition perspective. But I'm always
You're
curious to
getting phone
keep
calls,
my
though.
all the time.
Yeah.
And so I like to keep my finger on the pulse of that to understand, just to hear what they're looking for. And it's interesting that the biometric screenings as an offering had not fallen out of favor, but certainly been on somewhat of a decline over several years, and it just was not of particularly interest to the investment community. That has really, post-pandemic, the pendulum has swung back the other way, and there is this renewed sort of faith and observation in the process that it is very meaningful and important.
You think that's database because you have the numbers, or that's healthcare based and another access for, again, I'm going to call out large insurance carriers that we work with, like something that can help them increase revenue? That's a tough question. I mean,
yeah. So, and it's multifaceted. What you asked, I would suggest that this is largely from a population that realized without access to regular scheduled health care because of the pandemic and the shortage of doctors, nurses, and medical professionals in this country, that it just has their attention again. And as I mentioned, this sort of trend of technology over people also is being recognized in the investment community, that people really are a more significant influence in real behavior change, which is what's needed for people to shift from wherever they are to where they want to be.
that's good. We got about 3 minutes here left. I'm going to write that real behavior change because that'll transition into it. So that was a lot of health design stuff. We were a little bit all over the place. After the commercial break, mental health care, right? And coaching mental health well-being, or health well-being. Mental well-being. Man, that was hard to say. Mental health care versus mental well-being. There's a difference, right?
Yeah, I would argue there is.
Mental health care versus mental well-being.
I think there's confusion, and I think there is a difference, yeah.
One, like GLP-1 agonists, that's a really hot topic. I think you and I could dive into that. And then obviously the health span versus lifespan stuff. But
and ducks.
Ducks. Oh, we're going
I know you wanted to include ducks.
Right after the break, we are 100% talking about ducks and healthy or not healthy. We got about a minute and a half left. Any shout outs you want to give before we wrap it up?
Really, just to the health designs team who continue to be unwavering in their commitment and dedication to the process, right? Participant first, and our number one core value is doing the right thing, and every one of our teammates does just that.
I know you, Brittany. Actually, I've met a couple of your team. I shouldn't say that. Brittany and I just went to college together. Shout out to the health designs team. Trey, any shout outs before we go to a commercial break here?
Shout out Health Designs. I know a few of them.
Oh, that's right. You have one.
I've worked with them.
Oh, check out the
I had a good
dudes that do
experience.
videos. No,
Hopefully you guys have me back.
Great.
We'll screen you next time as well, because there's some information you need.
I'm down. My wife would probably love that.
Again, I'm not just saying this. Incredible culture, great people working there. You said it. You bought the company in 2019 and just facing a hurricane straight on, weathered the storm, and now you're starting to do the things that I think you really wanted to do for a while. So Christopher Topher Margolin, not Margarine. I said that earlier. Sorry, I hope that didn't bother you.
Not at all.
Okay. Health Design CEO, friend of mine, just a cool dude. That's what the health just happened. Welcome back to the second half of What the Health Just Happened. If you missed the first half, good news. It's available on your favorite podcast platform. I don't know. What are the names of all the podcast platforms, Trey? Just kidding. Don't answer that.
He was about to do it.
He was ready. He was teed up. We have CEO of Health Designs, Topher. That's what everyone calls you, including myself. Margolin. I want to make sure I say that right every time. I won't say margarine again, even though I just said it. I'm sorry. First half, a lot of Health Designs talk. That's 3 times I did that.
Okay.
We can edit that out if you hate it.
No edits.
It makes me smile. I like no edits. You've also got a good sense of humor. A lot of Health Designs talk. We talked about biometric screening, the journey, weathering the storm of COVID. We talked about a lot of cool stuff. I'm excited for the second half for a variety of reasons. The most important is healthy or not healthy.
Let's do it.
You ready?
Yeah, let's go.
Healthy or not healthy? Jeep owners.
Totally healthy.
There's some unhealthy Jeep owners, man. I'm kidding. We are Jeep owners.
We are Jeep owners.
Go ahead.
Healthy or unhealthy, the amount of time it takes to put the Jeep back together when you take it apart.
I don't do that. I pay someone else to do it.
I have. So we had a similar age Jeep. I have a newer Jeep now that basically puts itself
It
back
does it?
together.
Okay.
I push a button and it goes.
Okay,
It's
healthy or not
it's great.
healthy? Ducking.
So listen, it's a sensitive topic. I don't know when the last time you got ducked.
It's been a long time since.
yeah.
I don't think I've ever actually truly been ducked.
Well, you might want to explore ducking and see if it's the right thing for
Here we
you.
go. So if you don't have a Jeep, people put ducks in the dashboard. We talked off camera, and my goodness, ducking is a thing.
Ducking is a thing. So if somebody sees a Jeep they like, they are, I guess, encouraged. This came about during the pandemic, to put a duck on the Jeep for the owner to find when they come back. So you're not going in somebody else's Jeep, but you leave it
You
on
set a duck there.
on the mirror or on the handle.
What the duck is wrong with you guys?
Exactly.
Going off the rails.
So my son, who's 14, sort of had this realization. He's like, Dad, we've got no ducks. And I said, what do you want to do about that? He said, well, we better start ducking some other people. So we went out and ordered on Amazon, as one does, a couple of dozen rubber ducks. And, he now ducks regularly.
Ducking culture.
And the first time we received one, my son Jack came running and said, Dad, we got ducked. And my wife spun around.
What'd you say? Oh, man.
And we had to go through this entire iteration to explain where it came from.
That story just happened, and that's going to be a new term, Trey. We're going to use that
I was
often.
going to say we have not.
Healthy or not healthy, biometric screening.
Yeah, totally healthy. That's I think, undeniable and inarguable.
At what age? At what age is a healthy age to start, or is it like whenever?
No, I don't think it's whenever. I think knowing your numbers, as we say in the industry, is really important from your childhood years all the way till your end of life, right?
Okay.
Because really what you're talking about is the markers for health that include weight, blood pressure, cholesterol, and blood glucose. And all of those will give you insights into what your long-term health is going to be.
When you take your kids to the doctor, they're going like their annual exam, they're going to take those numbers. The chances of a young child having high blood pressure, pretty rare.
But if they do, you want to know that.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So that like the blood glucose, you can find out about type 1 diabetes young. So those numbers, I like that. Starting early, and they do as kids, but what happens when we get to 16 to 18, especially males, and then the 18 to 30 to 40 phase, we stop tracking these numbers.
And I would argue, you say that high blood pressure is uncommon. That's true. But listen, I think the greatest threat to anyone's health is the American diet.
Oh,
and the kids are eating what we're eating. And so things like high cholesterol
and high blood sugar.
High blood sugar are huge threats to child and adolescent health. And those habits and behaviors, if we can arrest them at a younger age, one, aren't going to be nearly as influential, and we can sort of correct course. And
we're going into that. Screw it. I was going to talk about mental flossing. Actually, we'll do it real quick. Healthy or not healthy, mental flossing.
Oh, mental flossing.
Mental flossing.
Very important.
We're gonna go
just
back
like
to that.
dental flossing, right? But nobody actually does dental flossing as much as they should.
I keep a floss in my car. I do it every drive.
I do the water thing, the spray thing.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
The water pick's
Okay, healthy or
great.
not healthy, dental floss.
Healthy.
You better say healthy, Trey.
Okay. It makes my gums bleed.
Let's go back. Let's do it, man.
And you know that oral health is a huge indication of overall health.
Oh, God.
It's a
Big
marker.
time.
Big time.
Oh, boy.
We're going to talk about GLP-1 agonist in a second.
Oof.
Before that, we didn't talk about this on the phone. Let's talk about the American diet. It's going to be brief because I want to talk about obesity, the pandemic, and what you think about GLP-1. It's tough.
There's so much to unpack there.
We got 19 minutes to be exact, but you got to cram.
I don't even know where to begin. I mean, look, here's the reality. During World War II, Europe, where most of the battles were taking place, wound up with its communities isolated and war-torn, and they became very insular and had to source locally. So they've held on to, even now, all these years later, farm to table, right? When you go into a restaurant in France, chances are you're eating vegetables from the farmer down the street, dairy from the farmer down the other street, and it's all locally sourced. We as a country got incredibly proficient at creating Spam. We needed to feed soldiers tens of thousands of miles away, and we needed to figure out how to process food.
Lots of calories.
And process food that could, stay unrefrigerated endlessly. And somehow we fell in love with processed food and kept
Twinkies.
it, right? And we've sort of there's been this divergence, right, in that. And so the American diet is,
A disaster, I'll say it.
we eat so much processed food. And, there was, at some point in the 1970s is when sugar, which was largely by the big sugar cane lobby and factories, started putting sugar in everything, like bread. I assure you, no bread recipes before then called for sugar to be added to a basic loaf of bread, and now it's in everything.
Guess what that affects? All those metrics you're measuring
Everything.
and long-term stuff. Okay, that's again. You want to have a 48-minute conversation?
It's a
on the
whole
American-
different episode, and happy to do it with you.
because I love talking about that stuff. It is a hot topic, right? So we had talked briefly about GLP-1 agonists. Do you guys know what that is?
Absolutely not.
Semaglutide. So right now it's very, very popular medication. I'm going to give an abbreviated version. It's for weight loss, right? It was
Oh, I
originally
have
given-
heard of this.
It's massive everywhere.
geez,
So
yeah.
it was given originally to type 2 diabetics to help control their diabetes. It helps with weight loss. So in your worlds, right, give your version, what it is and how often you're seeing the questions that come up, and then we'll talk about why it could be considered healthy or not healthy.
Yeah, so it's an interesting topic. So, yeah, you're referring to Ozempic, which is the name brand that came out. It was a diabetic drug that is very effective, and this off-label use for weight loss caused some mayhem, if you will, about a year and a half ago, because people were seeking it out. It was so effective, and suddenly there wasn't enough supply for the diabetic community, who was sort of made a public outcry to stop this because they need it to control diabetes, and it was really being used as more of a vanity drug. So then Wegovy came out. Wegovy is actually the one that's FDA approved
For weight loss.
For weight loss. It's a different dose, but it's the same drug as Ozempic. And it's interesting. So, and you and I talked a good bit about this, and we're not going to take up the whole rest of the episode.
We could.
But
yeah.
look, as a society, we're always looking for the silver bullet, the easy way. And frankly, it's here. And I think there's a real need and benefit for a lot of people that have had no viable defense against obesity to be able to have access to a drug that could have relatively remarkable results. 20-25% weight loss over that first year or so is a big number. And I think the challenge becomes, thus far, the growing body of research would suggest people come off the drug and they gain the weight back. It's not dealing with the triggers and the influences that are causing people to consume at the both quality and quantity that they were. And although the drug may be suppressing their appetite, urges, and impulses, it hasn't erased that, right? They're still programmed that way. So I think from a wellness perspective, there's a real need, and we're seeing growing options for intervention through coaching and other educational programming to help those individuals take advantage of the drug, and during that time of weight loss, start to really address the behaviors and make the shifts necessary so that they can keep it off when they come off the drugs.
You got something to say?
So you
'Cause I
think
gotta-
most people just hop on this drug, they lose the weight, and then they're not coming up with, like, let's say the workout routine that would really keep that weight off once they get off the drug?
I got a thought,
is
too,
it
to
making
tie
it
it
too
back.
easy for people?
I don't think it's making it too easy. I think the window of time that they're on the drug, it just has to be addressed. And I'll just make one minor observation to your comment. I think it's a common misconception that exercise leads to weight loss. Weight loss is typically much more of a function of diet than exercise. You cannot exercise away a bad
You can't
diet,
outwork
nor
a
can
bad
you
diet.
diet away lack of exercise. They're not mutually exclusive, but you can't sort of forego one for the other.
That was what I was going to say. There's a few people in this building that used it, and they were very annoyed that it wasn't just take this and be good. They were being taught diet trends and things to do for the month and a half that they were doing it, to hopefully come out with a new habit, I guess is.
I want to
the
take
goal.
this back to Health Designs, why you're here, why you're joining us. Talk about the business, the special stuff that Health Designs is doing. One, I hear a potential company to work with. Cox Media Group might need Health Designs to come in and do some coaching for you guys. So, but quickly talking about the medication, yes, it is very effective. It works. There was a shortage because it's very expensive. So in our world, does your health insurance cover it? Yes or no? It depends the medical condition. It's very complicated. The back scene as a business owner, the cost that comes with these medications.
Absolutely.
They are very effective. They work, period. There's endless scientific research. What happens when you come off of them? They're starting to learn that. How long do you stay on it? But it all goes back to, again, I want to make this about Health Designs and what you're doing, because we wrote this down. It all goes back to health coaching, working on the decisions and the behavior. So talk like these medications work. I've seen it work. I know people that use it. What you're doing for individuals and businesses is that stuff that matters for the long term.
Yes. So coaching, frankly, is agnostic as far as topic and content, right? Is it a structure and a method to communicate? And we're fortunate to have health coaches that really are very well versed in nutrition and diet and can help people navigate that. When you and I were talking, it really is we're sort of trends in the industry we're seeing, right? And it is interesting to see not only are people aware of the availability and success of these products, but there are conversations taking place where they are going to their employers and saying, if this isn't available to me, I'm going to seek out an employer that does make these available under our health plan because it's so effective.
I want to reiterate that. So an employee, you've seen it happen, we've heard it happen. Does our insurance, our health insurance, cover this medication? Because if not, I'm going to seek work elsewhere that covers this medication. That's how controversial this is right now.
And how expensive it is, right? Because to self-fund it, Ozempic's, $1,200 to $1,500 a month. Some of the semaglutides are less, but still several $100s a month. So,
I was going to say that's the low end.
Is it naive to just say something that good? There's just, for some reason, I feel like there's got to be a bad outcome. Like, my parents are always like, if it's too good to be true,
Yeah.
like
this, from a medical perspective, this is pretty darn good.
Okay.
And so I don't know that we have enough data to know what the real long-term effects for those that have extended use for years on this. But again, it looks very promising. But you have to address, again, if you want somebody to ever come off of it and not have that expense perpetually, we have to figure out how to help them navigate those choices and do that differently. And that's really what we do through health coaching.
That's a big,
our members
many
there.
things, but that's a big part of why we brought this topic. We could talk about. It's controversial. It gets eyeballs and ears, but part of Health Designs, working with these companies, right, is looking at who gets asked about it. How many times in these biometric screenings where a health coach is sitting down is someone bringing this topic up or asking about it?
It's happening more and more.
Yeah.
Again, it is a hot topic.
Like we're getting questions.
Are you
weekly
seeing
about this.
people of all age groups, like, hey, 21, maybe a little obese, have been that way their whole life and they're hopping on this stuff, or is it an older crowd of people?
I would research that, actually. I bet it's probably 30 and older,
30
the
and
highest
older.
users, but
I'm
that doesn't
guessing
mean
gotta have
that,
pretty good insurance, like you're saying, to get it.
or cash.
Yeah.
I think that people that really wrestle with obesity, and I'm not talking about, there are certainly people that from a vanity perspective are just trying to get rid of that stubborn 10 pounds. But if you're talking about people that really wrestle with obesity, morbid obesity, 100 pounds or more overweight, that is not age discriminatory, right? There are plenty of obese young people. Look, the Department of Defense has identified obesity as a national security risk because there's not enough healthy young people that meet the BMI levels to be able to come into our military to defend the country, right? It's
True
a big
story.
deal.
Yeah. No,
So if we can,
No, you're right.
Recruiting issues for all military branches are at an all-time low, and one of which is that people can't, the BMI issues and then the physical competency test to get in. Yeah, can you share the story about your friend? That kind of stood out to me, right? An example of, for some people, like you said, it is a vanity medication. You can pay cash for these at some places that are wellness spas, but This is a drug that works. Go ahead.
So I have a friend who is in his 50s, has been significantly overweight since childhood. He's an incredibly smart, kind, educated individual who has sought all sorts of different counsel and medical care to wrestle with his obesity to no avail. And he's very excited to be on the medication now and anticipates that he'll lose 100 pounds or more over the next year. And he needs to. And I asked him the question. I said, okay, so what about, coming off of it at some point? What are you going to do with it? And he looked at me and he said, I'll stay on it forever. I don't care. I'm on 5 heart medications now, and I'm going to die if I can't figure out a solution to the obesity. So that's that other extreme, right?
Yeah,
it sort of says, hey.
That's why it was created and used for, and it's going another direction. I wrote down some quotes that you said on the phone call. I like this one. If a smoker stops smoking and changes that out with nicotine gum or pouches, have they fixed the addiction or just traded it out for another? Love that line. He said that. I got another bomb. He dropped some nuggets, by the way. Topher, listen, you want to learn from someone, spend some time with this gentleman, but...
Oh, you're kind to say.
Oh, you're here. I got to wait till you But that stood out to me, right?
It's the same drug, right? It's just a different delivery. They're still hooked on nicotine. And again, are using that to change the behaviors to break the addiction. And for a lot of people, food is an addiction. So similarly.
Chicken wings and pizza, man. Oh, I can't get rid of it.
Would you almost compare it to, like, I don't know, if you got a bad ankle, instead of doing something to fix it, you just put a brace on, and forever you just use a brace while you're playing sports? Is it kind of similar?
That's I'm curious your opinion on that answer.
I'd have to think through that because I'm not sure I'd use that analogy.
Okay. Yeah,
but
that's
I'm not sure
that's
it's
not a comparable
inaccurate.
metaphor.
Yeah.
Save that question. We almost have to listen to that. You can answer that, but we got a couple minutes here left, and there were 2 more big topics to hit. Anything else you want to add on that, which again could be a 48+ minute conversation, not medical professionals, but we're seeing it more and more and familiar with it. You want to go down and it stinks that we're running out of time here, the mental health space or the health span versus lifespan conversation. I like both of them.
Yeah, I do too.
I'm doing health span, lifespan. I don't want to go, because if we go down the mental health thing, yes, it catches eyeballs. So just so you guys understand, health span versus lifespan. Lifespan, this is the number of years you are going to live. The average lifespan in the United States for females right now is, I think, 77.5, and males is like 73.5. And they could fluctuate a couple years.
I'm cool with that.
Right? Close to numbers. Health span, you take us, like, I'm just giving a description. How do you increase your health during that lifespan?
Yeah, so I think you and I stumbled on the topic together in conversation about longevity.
Yep.
Right? And longevity is really another one of the exciting spaces that I hope that from a wellness benefit perspective we start to get addressing more. And I think there's a lot of people you talk to and said, hey, why would I ever want to live to 100? Because those are the bad years, right? I'm falling apart. I've got cancer. I'm wrestling with this,
I'm in
et cetera.
diapers.
And,
yeah.
Yeah. And the entire objective of the longevity community is to say, how do we increase not the lifespan, but the health span, to your point? How do we, instead of getting to a peak of sort of in our lives in our 70s and then this slow decline and deterioration, how do we make that last 10 to 20 years one of vibrancy and health, and then sort of die quickly? And so we can enjoy our lives right to the very end without this sort of glide path to nowhere. And
I assume you're familiar with Dr. Peter Attia. Have you read the book Outlive Yet?
Attia is one of the
leading experts in longevity. And sometimes I like for these guys to hear this too, but it also goes back to disease prevention versus treatment, right? You start working on these things younger, your health span, your lifespan, it could fluctuate. The average is what it is, but how do you stay as healthy as long as possible so that those end years you're not in diapers and miserable?
Yep.
And again, we're butchering this. This is a long conversation.
But
what are things that impact that?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that's very common throughout all of the wellness discussion and longevity, right, is sleep, exercise, and diet are going to be the three most significant contributing factors to all aspects of health.
What's the most underrated? So sleep, exercise, diet. What's the most underrated?
Oh man, probably sleep.
I think sleep.
Right, and this notion of sleeping you're dead, or I can grind, I can hustle, I can make it on 4 hours, and the reality is the toll that takes on your body and just your ability. So that's interesting. I think what's growing in the longevity community is looking at, yes, those are important, and we just know a lot more at the cellular level about how age affects our body, and there are ways to arrest some of those processes, not so we can live forever, but so we can stay healthy and don't succumb to some of the things that threaten us more in our later years.
Yeah. Have you noticed with the younger generation a more focus on that sleep? Because I know, like I have a younger brother, and just off of social media trends, there seems to be a push to don't do the grind, the early years of work. Make sure you sleep in and get your rest and hit the gym. Is that a younger person thing, and is it because some of that information's available?
I don't know. I don't have any data points on that. I'm happy to hear it.
Yeah.
That'd be great, right? A respect. I do think that there is, because a lot of the wearable devices, I have a Whoop strap on, I think I saw some with an Apple Watch that actually measure sleep quality and some of the different things that happen when you sleep. That's significant. So I think there is a raised awareness there, and I hope we see that trend continue.
I am contemplating ending this episode and then going right into another 48 minutes because we've got less than a minute here. Dang it, that was getting into the juicy stuff that I love. That was
I'll come back.
Ducked up. I'm going to start saying it all the time. Topher, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me.
Did you enjoy yourself?
Always.
Good. Again, I knew we'd start getting into the stuff that I want to talk about. Topher with Health Designs, the CEO of Health Designs. I always try to say CEO. I love when people say, I'm the CEO. You never do that, man. You're humble. You're down to earth.
Listen, I've been masquerading as an adult for a long time, and I'm still trying to figure out when somebody's going to step out and be like, hey, you're not supposed to be here.
Good times. We're getting you back on soon because we need more time together. That's What the Health Just Happened.